episode of Talk This. It's dangerous to podcast alone. I'm your intro host, Madelyn, and just when you thought you were used to our former side quest format, we've decided to shake things up here at Talk This. See, we got a little bored of these mini little side quests that we were doing, and we decided we were going to flip on our multiplayer mode of this podcast game that we're playing and take on a head-to-head battle. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we're doing a new kind of side quest where your two podcast hosts here at Talk This are going to battle each other on the topic of our choice. This week, the topic we're going to be talking about with you all is downloadable content, also known as DLC. You'll hear a 3-minute argument from each of us, followed by 2-minute rebuttals. So yes, it's still going to be 10 minutes, and then Emma will take us out at the end and maybe tell you who won. I don't know what she's going to do. I can't control her. We're adversaries now. So without further ado, we're going to jump on into the first head-to-head side quest episode of Talk This. Downloadable content, aka DLC, is bad for video games and video gamers alike. Well, I will admit that there is DLC content out there which is worthwhile and worth purchasing and worth playing. The vast majority of it is companies blatantly ripping you off. It's a cash grab for content that is completely inessential. Think about it. If you're paying just $1 for a new character or a costume pack, and frankly, you're probably paying more than that, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say you're paying just $1. Is that equivalent to you to 1/60th of a full game? You're paying $60 for a whole game, hours and hours of content, detailed imagery, detailed design, game design, a whole cohesive plot. It's just one sort of set of bonus costumes or a new character worth 1/60th of that work? I don't think so. Which brings me to another point. Video games are really expensive to begin with. We sort of forget about this when we get steeped in the world of it because we're used to these high sticker prices, but I really believe that a large part of the reason that video games haven't become a part of truly mainstream culture, like movies and television, I won't debate that video games have become higher profile in recent years, but they aren't at that same level of cultural ubiquity where everyone is talking about a video game, or it's must-play video games, on the same level as must-see TV, peak TV, or movies that have been nominated for Oscars. We all talk about those. The reason that video games haven't hit this cultural mainstream, I think, is largely because of the huge financial investment of becoming a gamer. So it's one thing to pay $10 a month for Netflix, right? It's another to have to invest $400 in a system and then a bunch of games that are $60 on top of that. And then, on top of that, you're telling me I have to keep forking over money for bonus content? No way! I'm gonna rewatch The Office for the 5th time instead. Nope. Even worse, sometimes DLC isn't really bonus content at all. In this era of never-ending patches, when you buy a game when it first comes out, most companies are essentially treating you as a beta tester. You've got this buggy, flawed game. And well, yes, the necessary patches are generally released for free. Why is it that buying the game doesn't entitle me to the full experience, with all the characters you've created, and all of the outfits, and all of the side quests that I want? Why make them separate and force me to pay more to have a truly complete game? You've probably, if you're Final Fantasy or whatever, you've already spent years developing the game to begin with, so what's a couple more months? Big deal, add it on and give me all the content that I've already paid a ridiculous amount for. So in summary, DLC alienates non-gamers and thrifty gamers like me, because 9 times out of 10 it adds almost nothing to the gaming experience, except the feeling of a little less money in your bank account. And that's my argument.
You're on the wrong side!
So, DLC. It's kind of a new concept because it's only really been made possible by programs like Steam and I guess the digital marketplace in general. And I think that designers are still trying to figure out the best way to use DLC when designing their games, thinking of it from the start, thinking of it after, thinking of it during development, and trying to figure out what kind of DLC works best for the consumer. So here's my policy on DLC. I think that it needs to add something to the game that's not strictly necessary for understanding and having experienced the game. I think that it should be something that only people who are truly interested in the game, interested in the story, the world, the lore, the gameplay, should want to buy, because it shouldn't be necessary to have quote-unquote completed the game. I guess it doesn't really have to be strictly necessary, like costumes. Not strictly necessary. I mean, costumes don't really add something to the game, but I guess it adds to your experience of the game. And costumes aren't for everybody, but sometimes people actually really do appreciate costumes. So if the developer wants to do it, if it doesn't take away from the game at all, if they want to release it, that's fine. And I think that things like costumes or extra levels that don't necessarily like enhance the story but enhance the experience can also just be ways for people, when they really appreciate a game or really appreciate a developer, to sort of show that appreciation in a tangible way. Like if they really love a game and there's costume packs and they think that they're fun, why not let that be something that they can buy and that the developers make available for them, because it helps the developer and it doesn't do anything bad to the consumer. And I can't imagine a ton of effort. It doesn't take a ton of effort to do costumes, although I don't know. Bigger DLC packs like the open world stuff is a little bit more complex, because I think that open world is such a unique kind of game, one that I've never really been able to get into, because the user experience is so unique. Every player has their own story more than any other game, even though that's true of every game. And DLC expansions like Witcher 3 Wild Hunt or Horizon Zero Dawn The Frozen Wilds are really sort of ways to make mini sequels, continuations of the experiences that the player have had in that world without making an entirely new game, which I think is hard to do in something like an open world, because the main driving force of an open world isn't always the true narrative. And, if it adds to the player experiences, expands on something that they're interested in, like me, I just bought episode Prompto, what's wrong with it in that case, as long as it doesn't take away from the game?
Shut up and sit down.
What's wrong with it as long as it doesn't take away from the game? Plenty of things. I would so much rather that a developer I like be putting the time that they sink into creating bonus outfits and bonus costumes and little mini side quests and all sorts of DLC staples into designing and getting a new game to market. There are so many games that we've talked about on the podcast that are from indie developers that have only created one game, and I would so much rather them be posting updates about what they're doing next than the things that they're adding to the game that's already been released. I also, though, think that the idea of buying DLC as being a way to sort of support the developer is a little bit naive. I mean, sure, that's all well and good when we're talking about indie games. Like, it's great to be throwing them extra cash, but it's not just indie studios who are profiting from this model, and it's really not even them who are majorly profiting from this model. It's the big video game conglomerates. It's like saying, like, oh, I'm gonna tip EA Sports because I want another, outfit for when I'm playing EA Soccer, right? Like, that seems completely unnecessary. It seems that, like, what Emma is saying is that buying a DLC is essentially sort of tipping a developer. But that's a bad model in the restaurant industry, and it's a bad model here too. I really think the best way to sort of take this content and use it in a more productive and just like good for everyone way is that to handle it in the same way that movies use special features on DVDs, or even sort of a la the model of New Game Plus. If there was a way to release the bonus content to people who have finished the game, like reward them for finishing by allowing them access to this content for free, I think that really that would be the way to do it. And then if you didn't want that, if you wanted the content before you had finished the game, sure, you could purchase it and that would be great. But I think right now, it's just cash grubbing. So much of the time, it's just grubbing for cash, and I just don't like that feeling of being used by these developers.
Objection!
What Madelyn has said perhaps shows a bit of a lack of understanding about how game development works. Indie games obviously release DLC much less often than AAA games because they don't have the people or time or resources to it. Although when they do, it can sometimes keep the money flowing in, but we won't talk about that right now. We'll just talk about AAA. And a team that works on DLC in a AAA studio is of course much smaller than a team that worked on the original game because it's a smaller project. The majority of a team that worked on a game goes to join another team that's working on a game or joins to start a new team that's working on a new game. There's always more than one game in development at a time with large teams that swap between different things as they're needed. So it's not that working on DLC means that they're not working on new projects. That's just a silly thing to claim. As for the tipping concept that she put to my previous argument, think of DLC kind of as digital merch, I guess. Like, don't think Marvel isn't making tons and tons of money off Baby Groot merchandise, because they are. They are rolling in those sales. And DLC is not that much different of a model. So to say one is bad and one is okay is sort of stupid. And to say a word on patches, which she also mentioned, yes, I hate that there's this trend of games being released with unfinished and buggy updates rolling out way after release with things that should have had in the original release. But that has nothing to do with DLC. Let's talk about episode Prompto versus Final Fantasy 15. They're rolling out updates more and more, and that's silly. They should have had that from the beginning, but episode Prompto is an entirely different thing, separate from the main plot, that wouldn't have made sense to be as part of the main game, and that's why one is paid and one is free. It's just to put acknowledgement on that. And at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with giving the consumer some options. They can decide what they want to buy. At the end of the day, a business needs to stay afloat, and if DLC can help them do that, can help them make more games, that's okay. Hello everyone, it's Emma. Thanks so much for listening to me crush Madelyn into a bloody pulp. Just kidding. But we would love to hear your thoughts on DLC, whether you hate it, whether you love it, whether you really could not care any less about it. So feel free to always hit us up on our email, talk to us at talkthispodcast.com, or hit us up on any of our social media channels, which is at Talk This Podcast. And if you want to know more about the podcast, you want to subscribe, you want to see our show notes, our blogs, it's all up on talkthispodcast.com. And we really encourage you to go there, share this podcast with your friends, let us know what you think, all that good stuff. Next week, we're back to another full-length episode with Animal Crossing and Horizon Zero Dawn, which I think will be a fun one to do, and we're finally out of Square Enix limbo, so moving on from that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I hope you have a complete non-downloadable content day. That didn't make sense. Just have a great